To see a woman as she is, stripped of her artifice, is a temptation that intoxicates the mind of certain men. It is the lure of the philosopher's stone in human form, the belief that if one can pierce the veil of charm, beauty, and deliberate mystery, one will hold a kind of ultimate power. Yet in reality, the power gained is not always a treasure, but often a burden. When the veil falls, so too falls the theater upon which attraction and influence are built. This is why so few can bear the gift of clear sight without cursing it. The feminine art, whether conscious or unconscious, is to create an atmosphere where belief matters more than truth. She understands that desire is not born from facts, but from what the mind can imagine. A woman's allure is her most subtle fortress, crafted from glances, silences, and half-revealed truths. The man who sees through her, who can read the faint tremor in her voice, the calculated pause before she answers, or the unspoken motive behind her kindness, does not merely read a story. He begins to erase it. And when a story is erased, so too is the spell that bound him to her. It is a curious thing that the man who gains such vision often finds himself lonely among women. For once he knows the machinery behind the curtain, the stage loses its magic. He begins to see the pattern repeat in many forms. The same subtle manipulations, the same defensive charms, the same appeals to male vanity disguised as vulnerability. What once fascinated him now seems predictable, and what was once mysterious now feels almost mechanical. This is the first curse of transparency, the death of surprise. Yet there is a more dangerous curse still, when a woman senses that a man truly sees her. The part of her that is calculating, self-serving, or afraid, she does not always feel understood. She often feels threatened. Jung observed that the human ego resists being unmasked, for it is like a fragile idol that fears shattering. A man who strips away the illusions a woman has built about herself does not merely expose her to him. He exposes her to herself, and the reaction to such exposure is rarely gratitude. It is defense, retaliation, and sometimes destruction. The danger lies in the fact that a woman's charm is not only her tool to influence others, but also her shield against her own doubts. To dismantle it without offering something greater in its place is to strip her of her weapon and her armor at once. Few will forgive such a theft. She may smile in the moment, pretending that she is amused by his insight, but deep in her heart she will begin to plot, either to reclaim her power over him or to remove him entirely from her sphere. The seduction of transparency, then, is a paradox. The man believes he gains mastery by knowing, but he loses influence if he shows that he knows. Machiavelli would warn such a man to treat his insight as a hidden dagger, not a displayed sword. To hold it concealed is to keep the theater alive, to allow her illusions to breathe and serve their purpose, while his mind remains unclouded. The man who flaunts his perception may feel superior, but he will soon find himself excluded from the stage entirely, replaced by another who plays his role without disturbing the play. For there is a truth about human nature that no amount of psychological theory can erase. Most prefer the comfort of illusion to the weight of truth. A woman's beauty, her charm, and her emotional theater are not accidents. They are part of the structure that sustains relationships, desire, and power itself. When a man tears away that structure, even with the noblest intentions, he risks collapsing the entire edifice. This is why the ability to see through women, while intoxicating to the ambitious and the clever, can turn into a silent exile if not governed by restraint. The wise man, therefore, must learn to wear his vision like an invisible crown, never parading it, never using it to humiliate, but holding it quietly as a private advantage. To be seduced by transparency is to mistake knowledge for control. The true mastery lies not in dismantling illusions, but in deciding which ones to leave standing and which to remove only when their destruction serves a greater design. There is no greater peril for a man who deals with women than to rouse their instinctive hostility by revealing what he sees too clearly. To awaken this hostility is not merely to lose affection or trust. It is to provoke a response from an ancient part of the feminine psyche, a force as old as survival itself. Carl Jung warned that the human soul guards its hidden motives with the ferocity of a living creature protecting its young. And in the case of women, these motives are often entwined with the art of influence. To threaten that art is to invite a war that will not be fought openly, but in shadows, whispers, and subtle destruction. A woman does not always act against a man because he has wronged her indeed. More often, she acts because he has seen something she would rather keep unseen. It may be a private fear, a self-serving intention, or an unspoken calculation. Whatever it is, it forms part of the foundation upon which she stands. When a man exposes it, even without malice, he strikes at her stability. Few people will thank the one who pulls away the mask that keeps them safe in the eyes of the world, and fewer still will forget such an offense. Machiavelli knew that in politics, to show a prince his flaws without first securing his loyalty is to invite dismissal or execution. The same principle governs the domain between man and woman. If you wish to maintain influence, you do not strip away her illusions before she is ready. You allow her to believe that her fortress still stands, even if you have already mapped its walls. To let her see that you have penetrated its defenses is to mark yourself as an enemy. This hostility, once awakened, does not always manifest in open confrontation. A woman skilled in social maneuvering will rarely attack directly. Instead, she will begin to undermine the man in the arenas, where his strength depends on trust. She may question his motives to others with a tone of innocent concern. She may withhold warmth at moments when he most needs it, causing him to question himself. She may introduce doubts into the minds of his allies, not by accusations, but by subtle observations that plant seeds of suspicion. This is the battlefield of the feminine. Not the clash of swords, but the slow and silent erosion of a man's position. Jung observed that the shadow, the hidden side of the psyche, resists exposure with all the cunning at its disposal. In women, this resistance often wears the mask of virtue, allowing retaliation to appear as a moral response rather than a personal vendetta. The man who exposes her hidden motives may soon find himself accused of cruelty, arrogance, or dishonor, not because these qualities are real, but because such accusations restore her advantage and cast him as the villain. What makes this danger so insidious is that it often catches the perceptive man unprepared. He believes that truth, once revealed, should command respect or at least acceptance. But truth in the realm of human relations is rarely welcomed unless it flatters. A woman whose dignity feels threatened will not weigh the accuracy of his perception. She will only feel the sting of being unveiled. Her hostility will be swift in its awakening, but patient in its execution, striking not when he expects, but when he has grown careless. The wise man understands that to see clearly is not a license to speak clearly. Vision is a weapon, and like all weapons, it must be used with precision and timing. There are truths that can be wielded without consequence, and there are truths that, once spoken, ignite a fire that will not be extinguished. The ability to distinguish between the two is the difference between influence and exile. To awaken hostility unnecessarily is to turn the battlefield against yourself, for even the most subtle of women, once provoked, will employ every tool at her disposal to restore her sense of control, and to ensure that the man who threatened it will never do so again. Human interaction between man and woman is never a naked exchange of truth. It is a dance of symbols, gestures, and calculated silences, where each plays a role for the sake of attraction, influence, and mutual benefit. This dance is the game, and it is as old as courtship itself. In this arena, masks are not lies in the vulgar sense, but instruments that make the play possible. The woman wears hers to inspire desire, the man wears his to maintain pursuit, and both understand, consciously or unconsciously, that the illusion is necessary for the theater to function. When a man sees through these masks and discards them too openly, he disrupts the game, shattering the unspoken contract that sustains it. The disruption rarely comes from the seeing itself, but from the revealing. A man may carry the knowledge of her unspoken motives, her strategic charms, and the self-serving patterns beneath her tender words without destroying the structure. But when he speaks it, acts upon it too directly, or allows his detachment to be seen, he tears at the fabric of the performance. Suddenly, the glances lose their power, the gestures lose their suspense, and the unspoken tension collapses into something cold and clinical. A game without mystery is no game at all, and once the play is broken, both participants lose the pleasure it once gave. The woman, deprived of her stage, does not merely feel bored, she feels unarmed. Her tools of influence are woven into the illusion, and when the man strips these away, he forces her into a position she did not choose. Without the game, she must either bear her truest self, something most human beings instinctively resist, or withdraw entirely. Neither option favors him, for vulnerability shown under compulsion breeds resentment, and withdrawal leaves him without her presence altogether. Machiavelli understood that in politics, as in love, the theater is not weakness but necessity. A ruler who discards ceremony loses the awe of his court, just as a man who dismantles the game loses the enchantment of the woman. The rituals, the feigned ignorance, the small pretenses are the scaffolding upon which desire is built. By tearing it down, the man exposes the raw mechanics of human nature, and while these mechanics are fascinating to the philosopher, they are intolerable to the player who wishes to remain in the fiction. In Jungian terms, the game provides a space for the anima, the archetype of the feminine in the male psyche, to dance freely, to project beauty, mystery, and emotional depth. Destroying the game forces the anima into confrontation with the shadow, the hidden truth beneath the image. This confrontation is rarely gentle, for it strips away the comfort of projection and replaces it with the discomfort of reality. In doing so, the man not only changes the woman's perception of him, but also his own capacity to feel the enchantment he once did. The loss is mutual, but the reaction is rarely symmetrical. The woman, whose skill lies in shaping the atmosphere of interaction, will often view the man's breaking of the game as a violation rather than a discovery. She may retreat, she may retaliate, or she may simply redirect her charm towards someone more willing to play. The man, for his part, may feel a hollow satisfaction in his victory of insight, but he will also feel the emptiness of a stage where the actors have departed. In this way, the disruption of the game is both a liberation and an exile. It frees the man from illusion, but imprisons him in a realm where connection is stripped of its theater, and thus of much of its fire. He is left to observe rather than participate, a spectator to a play he once moved within. The insight remains, but the dance is gone, and with it, the mutual intoxication that makes the struggle between the sexes both dangerous and delicious. This is why the man who values influence must treat the game not as deception to be destroyed, but as an arena to be mastered and preserved until its destruction serves a purpose beyond the satisfaction of knowing the truth. To see and not to show that you see. This is among the highest forms of mastery in the dealings between man and woman. It is the discipline of knowing the truth yet allowing the illusion to stand, of perceiving the game yet pretending to play it without resistance. Machiavelli would say that power is not merely in the possession of knowledge, but in the timing and manner of its use. Feigned ignorance is the shield that keeps one within the circle of influence, while concealing the blade of perception until the moment when its strike will bring the greatest advantage. The man who sees too much and speaks too soon destroys his own position. A woman's charm, like a court's ritual, is sustained by the belief that the other accepts the role being played. If he reveals that he is not fooled, she sees no stage on which to perform, and the atmosphere collapses. But the man who pretends not to notice, who plays his part as though her illusions were reality, keeps the theater alive while holding in reserve the knowledge of its mechanics. This allows him to navigate her designs without inviting her hostility, and to shape the course of events without ever appearing to guide them. Feigned ignorance is not the same as blindness. Blindness is a weakness. Feigned ignorance is a weapon. It is an active choice to conceal one's sight, to allow the other to believe they are unseen. It requires patience, for the instinct of the perceptive man is to reveal his insight as proof of intelligence or as a means to test loyalty. But in human affairs, revelation is often the death of influence. By letting a woman believe her illusions are intact, he preserves her comfort and her willingness to engage, while secretly guarding himself from being drawn into the very snares she weaves. Jung understood that the psyche clings to its projections, and that stripping them away without preparation provokes resistance and hostility. The man who masters feigned ignorance can work within these projections rather than against them, using them as channels to influence rather than obstacles to overcome. She sees in him what she wishes to see, and while she is occupied in maintaining that image, he moves unseen toward his objectives. The skill lies in the balance. Too much feigned ignorance, and he risks being underestimated or dismissed. Too little, and he risks revealing the full extent of his sight. The art is to respond as though he understands only what she intends him to, even when her words and actions betray far more. When she offers a falsehood, he meets it with a nod and a smile, as though he has taken it at face value, while storing away its implications for later use. When she tests him with subtle provocation, he reacts as though the game were not apparent, allowing her to believe she still holds the upper hand. Such restraint grants him two advantages. First, it keeps her unguarded. Believing herself undiscovered, she will reveal more freely, not only in words, but in tone, gesture, and the rhythm of her moods. Second, it allows him to control the moment of revelation. There will come a time when the truth, if delivered with precision, can alter the balance of power decisively. At that moment, the years of feigned ignorance will serve him well, for the strike will seem sudden and devastating, though in truth it will have been prepared. Since the first day he saw through her, Machiavelli would counsel that a prince should sometimes seem unaware of the conspiracies around him, until the conspirators have fully committed themselves, at which point his response can be both justified and effective. The same is true here. By allowing the woman to believe her strategies unseen, the man permits her to weave them to completion, ensuring that when he chooses to act, the effect will be absolute. Feigned ignorance thus becomes not a passive stance, but an active strategy of positioning, one that protects his influence while granting him the advantage of surprise. To practice it requires humility in appearance and discipline in thought. It demands that a man hide his pride in perception and accept that the satisfaction of being right in the moment is worth less than the power of being right at the decisive moment. In this way, the art of feigned ignorance is both a mask and a mirror. A mask that conceals what he knows, and a mirror that reflects back to the woman the image she wishes to see, all while keeping the truth locked safely in the vault of his mind. To see through women, to read their motives, to catch the flicker of calculation behind a glance, to discern the architecture of charm and the scaffolding of seduction, is a gift so rare that many men spend their lives in ignorance of it. Yet, for those who possess it, this gift does not bring only triumph, it brings an exile of the soul. It is a crown of thorns, heavy with both advantage and isolation. For the one who wears it gains foresight, but loses the sweet intoxication of the illusions that bind most men to women. Jung understood that the human psyche craves meaning more than truth, and Machiavelli knew that power lies in knowing when to preserve a lie for the sake of control. The man who sees too much cannot simply return to blindness, and thus his crown becomes his curse. At first, such vision feels like liberation. The veils fall away, and the man sees the patterns that others miss. He understands the calculated silence before an answer, the subtle steering of a conversation toward his weaknesses, the flattery crafted not from affection but from intent. With each encounter, his sight sharpens, and he feels invincible in the knowledge that no charm can deceive him. But with time, this invincibility reveals its hollow side, for the same illusions he dismantles are the very illusions that give warmth and sweetness to the dance between man and woman. Without them, the dance becomes a transaction, stripped of mystery, and the laughter that once delighted him begins to sound rehearsed. There is also the burden of knowing that truth, once seen, must often be concealed. If he shows too openly that he has pierced the mask, he will provoke defense, hostility, or retreat. Thus, he must live as an actor, pretending to be moved by gestures he has already unmasked, pretending to believe words whose underlying motives he has already calculated. This requires not only discipline, but a certain detachment, for to maintain influence, He must let others live in the dream, even while he lives in the waking world. It is here that the curse sharpens its teeth. The more clearly he sees, the less he can fully participate. Yet, within this curse lies a form of sovereignty. The man who wears this crown moves differently. He cannot be easily manipulated, for he recognizes the tools of manipulation as they are used. He can anticipate the turning of affections, the shift of loyalties, and the moment when charm becomes a weapon. He can choose when to play the fool and when to unveil his knowledge for maximum effect. In this way, his foresight becomes a fortress, and his restraint becomes the guard at its gate. Still, sovereignty in human relations is not without its cost. His relationships may be fewer, for many will find his presence unsettling without knowing why. Women may feel that he sees too deeply into them, and men may suspect he withholds truths that could shift the balance between them. The crown, though invisible, casts a shadow. It marks him as different, and difference is often met with caution, sometimes even fear. The greatest challenge for such a man is to avoid becoming hardened by his sight. If he lets the curse consume him, he will see only patterns and never people, reducing all interaction to a cold exercise in strategy. But if he learns to wield his vision with care, preserving certain illusions, not out of weakness but out of wisdom, he can turn his exile into mastery. He will not be as other men are, bewitched and blind, but neither will he stand as a bitter spectator outside the theater. Instead, he will sit in the highest seat, crown upon his head, watching the play unfold, knowing that he can step onto the stage at will, shape the act, and depart again without ever losing his command over the scene.